Should I do my e-learning today?
Don't do it. It's almost the end of the year. But there's still so much more to learn. You don't want everyone to be smarter than you when we get back to school.
But everyone is smarter than me.
Yes, everyone is already smarter than you. That's not true. You're part of everybody, and you can't be smarter than yourself. If you don't want to do it, just tell Mr. Nyson your computer crashed. But wouldn't you have to use your computer to tell him that?
I'm just gonna quit.
But quitters never win. But they do get done in time to play Fortnite.
Happy Wednesday, everybody, and I hope everyone's making good decisions as we wind out this school year. And so try to keep up the good work. You know, sometimes we hear, voices in our head telling us one thing, telling us the other. Sometimes it gets so bad. My father-in-law is a doctor, and I went and told him, I said, I'm hearing all these voices in my head. And he just kind of looked at me funny, and I go, I'm hearing these voices in my head. He looked at me and said, that's where most people hear voices. So make sure you take attendance. This is Wednesday, May 20th. Get that attendance taken. And this is your e-learning. And so remember, it's Wednesday. And so Mrs. Wagner always has her 7th grade opportunity for everyone to see each other on the Google Meet. And I'm going to be there. And so hopefully you can be there. And we can kind of surprise. And if you've never been there, it's like, whoa. And then we get to see everybody. And so hopefully you can make that. Even if you don't have to stay the whole time, just try to. And so I know I haven't made it. And so, but we wanted to see everybody. And so make sure you get that done. Also, next week, we want your textbooks back. This actually is the last, Friday is going to be the last book assignment. And then next week we'll have assignments, but they'll be handouts. And so I'll get you those. And so we'll be turning our textbooks. So if you have old assignments you want to redo, you need to get those done and get caught up. And so some of you signed up for that math competition tonight. And so that's 4 to 7. And you got information about that. Let me know if you need anything, how it's going. And so that should be exciting too. And so it is Wednesday, May 20th. And so today we're going to spend our last day on quadratics. And so you miss out. We're not doing any story problems. There's just no time. And so we're going to finish today. The homework is page 577, 2 to 30 even. It's just 15 questions. And it's solving quadratics by different methods. And then Friday we're going to start trigonometry, sine, cosine, tangent. And we're going to do that for Friday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And yes, we will have assignments next week, and you're going to have to get them done on Thursday that day. And so you'll have to get them done. There's no weekend next weekend. So, but this week, you still have the weekend and to work on logic problems and things. So today, this is notes number 128. And so we're going to talk about different ways of solving quadratics and just kind of review all the methods. And so all these things you have in your bag of tricks. And so we can, here we go. The first method we ever learned when it came to solving quadratics was what, Judah? Yeah, factoring. And so we always like to see if things could factor. Because if they factor, that's the easiest method. Now, some people don't even hardly teach factoring because they're like, oh, it's too hard thinking of all the factors. But you guys, you can do it. The next method is just take the square root of both sides. And that's if you only have an x squared, you can do that. You can also, find a perfect square and square root both sides. You might say, well, that's kind of like the same method. And you might be right, as long as you get a perfect square. And I really don't like writing words with the mouse. then we hinted at this on one of the notes who never really did it. You could substitute to simplify the problem. And then the last couple days we talked about two methods that always work. All those other methods don't always work. But then these last two methods always work. And the one method is what? Ilya? Did you watch the intro? Is complete the square. And completing the square always works. But the downside of that is it is a long drawn out process, especially when you have fractions and stuff. So I'm just going to draw a simple square. Complete the square. And then what did that lead to then, Jacob? Well, that led to the quadratic formula. Joe's favorite song, because it's to the Notre Dame fight song. Just kidding, Joe. And so the quadratic formula. And so the quadratic formula always works. So you know what? These 15 problems tonight, you could use the quadratic formula on every single one of them. And why could you do that? Because it always works. And the thing is, it could be overkill too, if you don't need it. It's like, I think some country in the world gives the United States a problem, let's just nuke them. Boom! Took care of the problem. Probably not the appropriate response. You know, just try to solve the problem. Not just show what we can do every time because we can. And so we want to make sure that we pick the appropriate one, whatever's easiest to do. And the quadratic formula is not always the easiest. And so for this very first problem, you could sit there and go, well, I'm going to use the quadratic formula. A is 50. B is negative 98. No, see, I goofed that up because B is in front of the x. And there is no x term. And C would be negative 98. And so I'd plug in. The opposite of B would be 0 plus or minus. And it's like, why? This factors. What could we factor out, Aiden? Yeah, we could pull a 2 out. And this would be 2 times the quantity of 25x squared minus 49. And then, Aiden, what does this factor into? Yeah, 5x minus 7 and 5x plus 7. Now, when you look at a problem, especially when you get towards the end, if it's an x squared, there's 2 answers. If it's an x cubed, there's 3 answers. If it's an x to the 4th, there's 4 answers. Otherwise called roots, and some of them might be the same. But like, are there 3 answers here? And some of you mess it up because you think 0 is an answer or you forget the 0. Are there 3 answers here? No. There'd be 3 answers if there was an x with the 2, and then x would equal 0. But 0 is not a solution to this. If you plug 0 in, you get negative 98, and that doesn't equal 0. And so there's only 2 solutions. And your 2 solutions are, if I can draw these braces, plus or minus, what would it be, Lauren? Yeah, 7/5. And so plus or minus 7/5. That's very good. The second problem, 3n squared plus 10n minus 5 equals 0. And you know, we always used to sit here and go, well, let's factor it. And then when it didn't factor, we just said it didn't factor. Well, guess what? We were lying to you. It just might factor into irrationals or imaginaries and crazy stuff you can't do in your head because it wasn't integers. And so you look at this problem, you go, well, maybe I should use the quadratic formula. And we like to see what method you're going to use. So on this one, what is the quadratic formula? Sing it for us, Colin. X equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Colin, what, you don't sound like that? Oh, sorry. And so minus 4ac. Now, sometimes I had 2 mistakes on the last algebra notes. And it's only algebra. Of course, today will probably be pre-algebra geometry. 2a, and it's like, oh my. But we'll try not to make any mistakes today. So opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared is always positive. Minus 4, a is 3, c is negative 5. That's going to make plus 60. So it's going to be negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 160, which is 4 square root 10 over 6. And the last one, I had a mistake. You always want to learn from your mistakes. And so I forgot to divide the denominator when I reduced. And so this is going to be 16 times 10, which is 4 square root 10. And then when we have it over 6. Now when you divide or reduce this, you could pull a 2 out of the top. But remember, you're reducing this, this, and this. Don't forget to cancel the bottom. And so we get negative 5 plus or minus 2 square root 10 over 3. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you're learning from them and making all these videos and things, trying to do 10 things at once. It's like sometimes I forget something. I say it and then I forget to write it because it's so fun writing with a mouse. And so negative 5 plus or minus 2 square root 10 over 3. So the quadratic formula is the way to go. Any other method? Do you really want to factor this into n plus 2 square root 10 over 3? Really? I can't figure this out. Okay? And so let's go to this one. Now we could just use the quadratic formula every time. Then I don't have to think. I don't have to solve the world's problems. I just burn all my bridges. And then I never have to think through anything. Not the way to go. You don't want to do that. And so, what are you saying, Jordan? This will factor? And you don't want me to do it some crazy way? And so, Jordan, what will this factor into? What two numbers multiply together to give you 8 and add together to give you 9? Yes, 8 and 1. And so y plus 8 and y plus 1. And so to use any other technique would be just not smart. But I listened to the voice in my head that said, just do quadratic formula. Just use math way. And so the answer would be negative 1. Whoa, that's terrible, Brace. Negative 1 and negative 8. But I'm trying to do the best I can. And the sun's coming up. Okay? Now, we got 2 more. And that's it. Otherwise, sometimes I forget to do them. And so I'll move myself down here in this corner for this one. So one thing you could do on this one is you could FOIL all this out and you could distribute the negative 5 and you would get it. But you could say, let 3x minus 2 equal y. This is just a different technique. And see, this would factor. And you don't have to use this technique. It'd factor into y minus 2 times y minus 3. Well, then y equals 2 and 3. Well, that was easy. Y equals 2 and y equals 3. But I didn't want y. I wanted x. So if I said this equaled y and this equaled y, well, then this equals 2 and this equals 3. And so a different technique. My job is to show you different ways to solve problems, maybe ways you wouldn't think of if you didn't have me and you were just there by yourself. If 3x minus 2 equals 2, some of you were doing these in your head and you messed up a couple times on your homework. You're like, well, 3x equals 0. No. If they subtract, we add. And so if you see your grades in the computer and you're like, well, I don't get my homework back, I don't know what I did wrong, you can go back and look at them and you can redo your homework and you can resend it to me. So if you're putting 0 over 3 as 0, it's really 4 over 3. And then let 3x minus 2 equal 3. And the answer is not 1/3. The answer is 5/3. And so if you FOILed all this out, minus 27x plus 20 equals 0 if you did that. And then you can factor into 3x minus 4 and 3x minus 5, and then you get 4/3 and 5/3. But you could do it a different way. Now, when you get to the end of your homework, you get to these last ones, you're going to have stuff like this. Now, you could do 9 halves is A, and 1/6 is C, and plug in fractions to the quadratic formula. I wouldn't be able to tell you the last time I had so much fun. No, you don't want to do that. What's the first thing you want to do, Abigail? Yeah, get rid of the fractions. Bye-bye. And we're going to multiply both sides by 18. And so if we do that, this cancels, and we get 4x squared. Then 18 divided by 6 is 3x. So I get 4x squared plus 3x minus 9 equals 0. Now, would that factor? I don't know. And sometimes it does. And if you sit here long enough, you're like, well, it would have been quicker to use the quadratic formula. And so what would the quadratic formula be, Mason? Yeah, go Irish. X equals opposite of B. That's -3. Plus or minus the square root of... Whoa, I need to move my mouse there. B squared minus 4AC all divided by 2A. Now you see 2 minus signs there. You know what? I want to make sure that I get the discriminant right. So on Khan Academy, remember the discriminant is just this value under here, and it is 153. So if I just write x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 153 over 8 and circle it and go on to the homework, Ryan, do you think I'll get any emails? Yes? Why? What's that, Preston? Yeah, 9 goes into 153 because 1 plus 5 plus 3 is 9. And so, Cole, how many times does 9 go into 153? Yeah, 17. So if it's 9 times 17, it'd be plus or minus 3 square root 17 all over 8. And the quadratic formula is the way to go. And those would be my solutions. And if you needed decimals, just put parentheses around the top. -3 plus 3 square root 17, hit enter, or put parentheses divided by 8. Otherwise, it's only going to divide the last part by 8. So on your homework today, it says... written exercises 1 to 12, solve the ones in oral exercises. Well, oral exercises just say what method, but we're actually going to solve it. So for problem 2, this is a perfect one for completing the square. You might think it factors, and you'd say x squared minus 2x minus 1, but the sign on the 1 is wrong because you'd have a minus 1. And so what you want to do is complete the square. And so what would we put on both sides? Erica, what would we put here to make this factor into x minus 1 quantity squared? Yeah, 1. We'd add 1 to both sides. So we get x minus 1 quantity squared equals 2. And then, Bree, what would we do to both sides? Yeah, we would square root both sides. Great job. And so this would be x minus 1 equals, but Ryan, don't forget the plus or minus. And so it's going to be plus or minus square root 2. And then we move the 1 over. Annabelle, does the 1 combine with the 2? No, 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 no. And so it's 1 plus or minus square root 2. And so even though I didn't complete the square on any problem on the notes, problem 2 is a perfect one for completing the square. Problem 4, if you want to solve this, you just pull an x out. And it's solved. And x would equal 0. Or, Rosie, x would equal, yeah, -11/8. You can always tell who watches the videos. I need help with problem 4. I just told you what the answer was. Problem 6, I'd set it equal to 0. Maybe use the quadratic formula. Problem 8, does it factor? Or should I use the quadratic formula? Problem 10, what I would do is square root both sides. And Ryan, don't forget the plus or minus. And so it's going to be x minus 2 equals plus or minus square root 7. And then move the 2 over. And this 2 plus or minus square root 7. Problem 12, perfect quadratic formula or factor it. Problem 14, you could complete the square on 14. That's a great one to complete the square on because you got x squared minus 8x plus blank equals 11 plus blank. And what could I add to both sides in order to do that? Hannah? Yeah, 16. Great job. How'd you know it was a 16? Because the next line would be x minus 4 quantity squared. Good job. And if that's x minus 4 quantity squared, then that would equal 27. You know, it's terrible to write in your book. Don't you try it. And so then we square root both sides. And it's plus or minus square root. Right? And so it'd be x minus 4 equals plus or minus square root 27. And then Annabelle, when we move the 4 over, it stays in front. And it'd be 4 plus or minus square root 27. Problem 16, I'd multiply by 12. Problem 18, I'd multiply by 100. Problem 20, I'd cross multiply. 22, I would distribute, and then I'd set it equal to 0. Problem 24, you could do my substitution technique. Otherwise, just set it equals 0 and FOIL the whole thing out. Problem 26, you got to FOIL this first and distribute this. Okay? And then when we get down to the last couple, 28 and 30, these will factor. You can do the substitution if you wanted to, but you could ignore it. Like on 30, you pull out an x squared. And then you get x squared times 3x squared minus 7. Well, there's going to be 4 answers. 2 of the answers are 0, 0, 0. It's a double root. It's a point of inflection on the graph when you get to Algebra 2 or pre-calculus. And then this one, you just set equal to 0, and your answer is going to be plus or minus the square root of 7/3. So if you did like 3x squared minus 7 equals 0, then you'd have 3x squared equals 7, and you'd get x squared equals 7/3. And then if you square rooted both sides, you get plus or minus. But you got to rationalize your answer. You can't say the square root of 7/3, and you can't say the square root of 7 over the square root of 3, because you need to multiply top and bottom by square root 3. And so then the other 2 answers are plus or minus square root 21 all over 3. So you got 2 of those answers, and you got 2 answers that are 0. This one, though, will factor. 5 and 1, x squared and x squared, and then those will factor again. But they'll have square roots in them, okay? So you try 28. I won't give you a hint on that. I gave you a hint by talking about 30, okay? So hopefully we'll see you today. I haven't been there. I know some of you are faithful. You're there every week with Mrs. Wagner, Mrs. Smith, and so we'll try to be there or surprise them how many of us will show up. And so it'll be good to see everybody. I think that's, 11:30 today? And so, hey, we miss all you guys. I got you here on the seating chart, but, you know, it's just not the same. And those of you who signed up for the contest today, great job. Looking forward to it. Don't get discouraged. Just do the best you can. And so the sun's coming up, but it's nice that there's some leaves on the trees because it doesn't blind me as much without putting something up to block the sun. And so, hey, have a great day. Email me. Let me know if there's anything you need help on. And so we miss all of you. Hang in there. It's the last Wednesday. Bye-bye.